Dr. Michael Morbius, the only doctor in the medical community making more noise than Dr. Love Robinson. He's been the talk of the internet ever since the initial release of his film a few months ago. Many consider this movie to be a joke, and not because it was released on April Fool's Day. This project is currently sitting at 17% on Rotten Tomatoes with critics, although its audience score is sitting at a decent 71%. I'm not sure what that's about. What I do know is I had no plans to watch this travesty. I am the biggest Marvel fan, but all the previews of this film just oozed with a certain ick to it. They made me avoid Morbius like some of you avoid hitting the like button on your supposed favorite content creators' videos. That is, until a certain tweet came across my timeline. The official Morbius Twitter account posted, "Thanks to everyone who brought Dr. Morbius home for a house call. Get the #1 movie on the Apple TV app now." I couldn't believe it. The movie industry decided to take a page out of the sports industry book. This tweet sounded exactly how sports analysts sound when they're trying to make a player seem better than what they are. This was the good old, did you know Calvin Cambridge is the first player to score 12 points and get 3 assists in only 12 minutes of play on a Wednesday night with a windshield warning type beat. I said to myself, okay, that's it. I'm taking one for the team. I'm watching Morbius. We need to get to the bottom of this, Scooby. I had to find out for myself if Morbius was a 17 or a 71% rating, which by the way is very fishy. This may sound like a tinfoil conspiracy hat moment, but am I the only one that finds it strange that on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score for Morbius is the critic score in reverse?
Coincidence? I think not!
Sony's got a lot of money. It's nothing to make a call and manipulate a website score if the money's right. But hey, could just be a weird coincidence. So I set out on a journey to watch one of the most polarizing Marvel movies since Johnny Storm was a black man in a white family. But first things first, I needed to find a platform to watch it on, and honestly, that was as easy as 1, 2, 3. Apple TV, of course. After all, this is the #1 movie on their app. I had to take the totally legal and convenient route to watch this film because I'm a productive citizen of society. Now, my thoughts are mostly negative about this movie, but I don't want anyone to feel like I didn't give The Good Doctor a fair shot. I legitimately didn't come into this film trying to hate, so here's a couple positives. The runtime is only an hour and 48 minutes, and it felt like it, and I mean that as a compliment. In an age where movies are getting longer, it was nice to finish a movie and there was still sunlight outside. Also, this movie was not as bad as the internet made it seem. Meme culture and people's desire for clout has made it cool to kick things when they're down. I went into this expecting Shaq Steele, and I came out thinking it was more akin to X-Men Dark Phoenix. Now, is Morbius good? No, but it's also not the worst thing that I've ever seen. Morbius' greatest issue is its lack of direction. You get the feeling that a bunch of ideas were thrown on a storyboard and Sony didn't spend enough time fleshing them out. The second major issue I identified is the tone of the film. This is a very different Marvel film, and if you're a casual comic book fan who only watches the movies, I can see this film being very confusing. Sure, it's a lot of dark things going on in previous MCU and Sony Marvel films, but they always did a good job of reminding you this is a superhero movie. Morbius, on the other hand, is very dark, and that's a double entendre, by the way. The tone of the movie is dark, and so is the cinematography. Morbius lacks the charm other Marvel movies have. There's hardly any one-liners or quips that make you want to like Morbius, and I don't want to hear it. I'm not a big fan of the Venom films, but if they can do it with him, they can do it with Morbius. It also doesn't help that Morbius is a D-tier Marvel character. Hardly anyone knows who he is, and it doesn't help that Marvel has a much cooler vampire who sells crack and can slay any other vampire in the Marvel universe. He just can't slay his taxes, but that's not the point. I used to read comic books regularly in my youth, and I only know who Morbius is because he appeared in the classic 90s Spider-Man cartoon. I did some research, and he doesn't have many of his own stories. He's mostly a side character that appears in other more popular Marvel character storylines. The crazy part is, this could have been a good thing depending on your perspective. The lack of source material also means you have the option to make changes to the character to make the film flow better without having to worry about facing backlash from people who are fans of the source material. Instead, what we got is what feels like a rushed project that tried to cash in on the hype of superhero films. The plot is weak. This is the third major problem with the film. It's hard to get excited about Morbius' struggles when we just got Multiverse of Madness, No Way Home, Shang-Chi, Endgame. Who cares? This guy accidentally turned himself into a bloodlust vampire to save his own life from a disease he's had at a young age. The movie tries to captivate you on the angle of, oh, is Morbius a good or a bad guy? Oh, and they do this by showcasing he doesn't enjoy sucking people's blood, but then they contradict that with the film's end scene credits, which I'll talk about later in the spoiler section of the video. Problem number 4, the villain. Lazy is the best way to describe him. His name is Milo. You guys remember Milo? Milo was a little boy who used to live in the TV and hang out with Peter Molyneux way back when the Kinect didn't have its name yet, and Microsoft was still referring to it as Project Natal. Still one of the weirdest things to happen in gaming. I'm kidding, by the way. Everyone knows Milo is the cat Alinity threw on stream.
Milo!
I swear I'm done joking. Anyways, Milo really is the name of the villain. He's a childhood friend who grew up with Morbius and has the same disease as him. He begs him for the cure. Morbius says no because of the vampire side effects, so he steals it, and then now they have beef. The villain is weak because it's a mirror match. Nobody who plays video games likes mirror matches. It's another Flash reverse Flash situation. The only difference is, at least with the reverse Flash, he has this whole storyline going on where he's a sociopath obsessed with Barry, so he travels through time to mess with him and inflate his ego. Milo is just a meaner version of Morbius, and I say meaner because Morbius really isn't a hero. He's a mean person too. There's no way for me to talk about this though unless we get into the... Morbius ends with 2 end credit scenes involving the Vulture from the MCU. I believe the timing of Morbius's ending coincides with the ending of No Way Home. Spider-Man and Doctor Strange got all these portals open and the Vulture ends up going through one and ending up in a jail cell in Morbius's universe. The scene was hilariously bad because the CG on the portals somehow looks worse than No Way Home. Just to, have some type of continuity, I don't understand why they couldn't just use the MCU's editors. Then, when the Vulture lands in the cell, he's not freaked out that he's in an alternate universe. I mean, I get he's a villain, but him being so calm was complete BS. The way things were executed at the end of Venom 2 was a much better example of how you use the multiverse. So the Vulture just stands there in his cell and he says, "Man, I hope the food is better here." It turns out the prison was empty and abandoned. I don't know how they found him, but they end up freeing him because nobody knew why he was there. Credits roll. Then another scene plays where the Vulture pulls up fully suited to meet Morbius and he says, "Hey man, we should team up." Okay, but where did the Vulture get that suit? He showed up in Morbius wearing prison clothes. Also, why make it seem as if Morbius is a good person who's different from the other vampires, only to end the movie with him agreeing to team up with the Vulture to take on what my educated guess would be is some version of Spooderman? Who knows? Anyways, I'm just gonna end the video listing off a few more nitpicks. Top of the movie, Morbius gets a reward from the King of Sweden. Then there's a quick transition to him hanging out with some sick kid, and she asks, "Hey Morbius, why did you diss the King of Sweden?" It sure would have been nice to see that. It would have given that scene much more needed context. I'm not sure if it was poor writing or editing and post-production. It was just a weird transition. Also, why does splicing your genes with bat genes give you super strength? Flight? Okay, that makes sense. Sonar vision? That makes sense. But unless I missed something in biology class, I didn't know bats had super strength. I mean, they're gross looking, but if one attacked me, I'm confident I would clap a bat. It would have made more sense if after the gene splicing, Morbius transformed into a brooding crusader of the night who wears a bat suit and needs therapy. Tyrese? He plays the same character he plays in every other movie. Tyrese. Not much else to say on that topic. But there's references to other Marvel properties in this movie, but none of them are good. You got a moment where he scares a thug and then he tells him he's Venom. Wasn't funny. Milo picks up a copy of the Daily Bugle in reference to Spider-Man, but the main offender is there's a moment where Morbius is craving blood and then he says, "I'm hungry. You won't like me when I'm hungry." That was the most ghetto Hulk reference I've ever heard. Also forgot to mention that the fights in this movie are bad. No real choreography, just CG spectacle. The movie uses a bunch of spoke special effects and swarms of bats to hide the fact that neither Morbius or Milo can actually fight. But you want to know the crazy part about this movie? And once again, this is not the worst movie I've ever seen. I had this epiphany. If Morbius had came out back in 2001, then Morbius would be considered a classic by most in 2022. The point I'm trying to make is things constantly evolve. What was the standard in 2001 with Spider-Man might not be as entertaining to the younger generation who grew up on the MCU Spider-Man. Writing, acting, and special effects have improved vastly since that era, so the consumer's expectations are naturally higher. Unfortunately, the producers of Morbius didn't get that notice. They thought a superhero movie was just enough, and thus we get a lackluster film. So, I tilt my hat to you, Jared Leto. You effed up Joker and Morbius. You managed to drop a stinker in the DC and Marvel Cinematic Universe. Bravo. Bravo. Hey, Mr. Leto, if you ever see this video, I have a favor to ask. Would you mind taking a role in the next Tyler Perry movie? We need you to ruin those too, so Hollywood will stop making them. I'm just saying.